houses down.
Wow, we're all here.
That's for sale right now. At 100,000. It'll be interesting to see what they would do once we live inside.
Yeah, I think that she's been really sorry for having that. Position behind,
Yeah.
but I'm almost tempted to make her an offer, you know. Maybe voice, you know, and do it on another month or
she's
something.
having-
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I just don't
There you
want
go.
to move just
Yeah, right.
so much stuff in the house.
Moving.
Well, scary, but just for the sake of
Having access to the garage,
From
she
this
said.
moment to forward, it's gonna be challenging. That, I don't see that happening anytime soon, so, you know. That's not in my cards.
Not in the plans yet, huh?
It's not in my cards. And my husband keeps saying he's getting too old to do this, he's 60. I'll be 58. Which I don't know how that happened. I have no idea how that happened.
Right. Is Byron? Byron, are you here?
I hear somebody back
Okay. Just want to make sure you were back.
there. I hear something back there.
He ran to get a bite to eat really quick, so I wanted to make sure he was here.
It's either a really large mouse.
Yeah, right. If it's a large mouse, we're in trouble.
I'm
Okay.
leaving, I'm out.
Ready?
Yeah,
Oh,
she'll be right
wait
back.
for Natalie.
Natalie, yeah, she can just that's a little hurt. Or staff report.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
We're all here tonight.
That's a whole
Full
whole
mission.
here. Gross, I like it.
Paying double today.
Huh?
They're paying double.
Overtime.
Overtime.
Overtime, huh? Oh, God. Okay. These chairs are comfy.
I know they are. It is warm in here, is
It's
it?
very warm in here.
It's just humid.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't notice it out with the winds it being
Mm-mm.
so much, but it is muggy out there, yeah. We're supposed to
And
get.
it changes
storms
depending on
later.
where you are in the building.
Yeah, the bathroom was comfortable.
We're gonna move the
It was
meeting.
nice and cool in there.
I haven't heard that one.
I don't think we should move the meeting. I really think that would be a bad idea.
No, the bathroom's kind of small. I don't think that'd work.
Okay, this is just wrong. Read that. I'm like, rain or snow events?
Alert.
No. It's just
Last year, or
wrong.
3 years ago, it snowed here.
Yes.
I have a picture.
I do
I
too.
do. I've got pictures
Thank
too of
you.
it. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you, thank
Big
you, thank
snowflakes.
It popped up
Yeah.
on Facebook.
Yeah, mine too.
Mine did.
I
I
just-
was like,
The
seriously?
staff report.
Car picture.
I did the same thing.
It was really cold that day, I
Sitting in my
remember.
car, I took a picture of it from the, yep.
Let's hope we're not having a.
It's really cold in Ireland today, I
A
heard.
tornado.
I keep telling
That's where I'm
everyone,
going next week.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, take me.
It's, the weather is just very peculiar.
Yeah.
When it gets so yellowish.
Supposed to downpour tonight. Yeah,
No, it's
right.
not that bad, but
I'll
look
go
at
get
that.
it. It's gonna be going into the.
As long as we're home before.
Okay, when they
This
get
is
started.
We need to hit that harder. Call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for May 17th. Roll call, please.
Barb,
Here.
Buckley,
Here.
Castro,
Here.
Kroll,
Here.
Near,
Here.
Wright,
Here.
Chair Atherton.
Here.
All are present.
Approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? If there's none, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
So moved by Kroll,
Second.
second by Barbie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The public participation part of the meeting. This is a chance where anyone in the public that is here that would like to speak to anything that is not on the agenda, if you'd state your name and address, we would appreciate it.
Jerry Smith, 139 Buena Vista Drive. I'm in my second week as your new mayor, the mayor-elect of the city of DeKalb. Over these past couple of weeks, I did not realize the breadth of items that are coming before this city and the mayor's office. One thing that I'm attempting to do here in the first several months of my term is to visit with each and every one of the commissions and boards. And I am so impressed with what I've seen thus far. Tonight's attendance, for example, all of you are here willing to serve this community. And I commend you, I applaud you, I look forward to meeting you, and I look forward to the work that you're about to do tonight and in the weeks and months ahead. Let me promise you one thing, and that is that I will not be attending each and every one of your meetings. But I do see that you've got a great staff here and to work with. And again, I appreciate the opportunity, Chris, to come before you tonight to just say hi, to say hello, and to say that I pledge to you as one of our commissions and to the residents of DeKalb that I will do my very best over these next 4 years as your mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
And I want to add to that and just let you know that I'm very proud to serve with all these other 6 people on this commission, and we do have a really great group here, so thank you very much for coming tonight. I will note that there was only one person in the public here, so we will move on to the next portion of the meeting. Approval of the April 26th minutes. Any additions or corrections? If there's none, I'll take a motion.
Motion.
So moved by Buckley,
Second.
second by Castro. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. There is no old business, so we move on to new business. Tonight is a workshop for text amendments to, sorry, got to get on the right page. Text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance, and so I'll turn it over to the city first.
Thank you, Chair. We occasionally bring forward possible text amendments to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we have a few tonight wanted to go over. Again, this is more of a discussion. After the feedback we get, we'll be in a position to go ahead and initiate a zoning petition, a text amendment, and then set a public hearing for a second meeting probably in June. But we just want to go through these and get some feedback from the commission and get some direction so we can formulate the specific amendment when we go forward with that. So the first part is looking at Article 3, which is the definition section, and Article 5, that lists all the zoning districts and all the regulations. Regarding social clubs and banquet halls, Chapter 32 in our municipal code has about half a dozen license requirements for different licenses in the city. One of those is social clubs, and that was added to the code in 2014. I provided a copy in your packet of Chapter 32, which includes social clubs. There's a definition for it. There's a list, several lists of license application process procedures for that type of use. There's a definition that indicates basically it's a use that's primary function is to provide entertainment to patrons consisting of dancing, pre-recorded music, different events with or without food in an indoor venue. One of the key items that it's not is they can't have a liquor license, can't serve liquor to be a social club. And there's some other things that it cannot be either. So, but it's not listed in the Unified Development Ordinance, social clubs. When one potentially comes in, we have to look at the uses that are in the ordinance to see which one it most closely resembles or follows. One of those is banquet halls, which is listed in the UDO. There's no definition, however, in the definition section for that use. Banquet halls currently it's a special use in the light commercial district, and then it's a permitted use in the central business district and the general commercial district. So we do recommend that a definition be provided for banquet halls, so it's distinguished clearly from social clubs. Also move possibly the banquet halls then as a special use in the general commercial and central business districts instead of a permitted. And then add social clubs again into the UDO, add the definition in there that's in Chapter 32, and then add it in the most appropriate, as a special use, in the most appropriate zoning district or districts. So we're looking for feedback on that. Perhaps just the general commercial, I think with that type of use we want, probably not in the downtown, probably an area that's well lit, highly trafficked, so that can be monitored, et cetera, plenty of parking. So the general commercial district's probably the most appropriate district to perhaps add that as a special use. I think we want to have that as a special use. If the amendments are approved, any existing banquet hall in the city would be considered legal non-conforming use. They could certainly continue, and they would just fall under the regulations of Article 19 in the UDO, which covers non-conforming uses. If we do get a good definition, which we plan to, we may not need to move banquet halls as is from a permitted to special use. It's kind of up to the commission if we want to do that. So I can move to the others, or do you want to kind of maybe focus on the others, or amendments relate to different parts of the code and a little different topic, but maybe we could discuss that or get feedback from the commission before we move
Yeah.
on to something else.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion. So has anybody, how about if I go down the road?
That's a good way to do it.
We'll start on this end.
Well, have you got a definition for
yeah.
banquet hall in mind, or
No, we
something,
pr-
a model that you?
Yeah, we could find one in another community, or we could probably come up with a
Oh, okay.
good one. So
All right.
it's not in there, so it's hard to define, but we want to make it clear separately from social club. Obviously, a banquet hall would, have events, et cetera, would be allowed to have liquor license.
Okay, all right, so that's the primary
That's gonna be the
issue here,
difference.
is the liquor license? Is that what?
Yeah, we'll probably make banquet halls where they could have a liquor license there, if they
Okay.
choose to. That would distinguish it from the social club. There could be other provisions we would add, but we look at some other communities, what they have, we could come up with a pretty good definition. I didn't come up with any specific language, I just want to make sure we come up with something that's going to be different, clearly different than social clubs. So
Okay,
that would be one of the key provisions.
okay.
My turn. So do you envision an existing establishment in the city that may become, depending on, I know this is going to depend on the definition, but do you envision any establishment in the city of DeKalb that may become a banquet hall under this definition?
Well, we have current verandas nearby as a banquet hall.
Mhm.
They're permitted in the central business district, so I think we want to make sure, anytime you come up with a definition, you want to make sure that you're looking at existing uses in the city
Correct.
and not
Correct.
box them out or make them non-conforming right away
Mhm.
unless you want to. So we don't make sure, that's the only one I think that I'm familiar with, so.
So in coming with the, and I'm rephrasing a bit of what you said, I think, in coming with the definition in the UDO and approved, then verandas may become a non-conforming legal,
If we
correct?
push banquet halls to a special use, they would,
Okay,
because they're permitted now. So we may not need to, if the definition is pretty clear, we may not need to do that. So there's been no issues with that operation.
okay.
I think. So there's some unique characteristics to those, and size of events and parking and things of that nature, but.
Thanks.
I have two questions. Is there a current operating social club that you could use as an example that's within now? And is there something that has happened or is happening to bring about the wording changes? And
I think it's just, I don't know if there's a currently operating one. We only had the ordinance for a couple years.
Right.
There was a,
So we had a business come in and make a request in the downtown central business district that had all of the appearances of being a social club. And we had initial discussions with them about the fact that the zoning ordinance didn't provide for the use of a social club, and that we would need to do a text amendment and come through that process and decide where they're most appropriate and whether there would be any conditions attached to that specific use. And we were using the definitions provided in the section of the code that Dan provided. But however, because it's not listed, they had a very crafty attorney involved in providing us with an alternate definition of what they believed their facility was, and they classified themselves as a banquet facility, which is listed as a permitted use in the central business district. So they did come in, we reviewed it and went through that process and found that we didn't have the right kind of tools in the code to be able to regulate that business appropriately. So that's part of the reason we're bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, I looked up the definitions of both because they seem to be very similar. Like what I found for a social club, it's something has to do with membership. So I guess you could like buy a membership or I don't know. And could you have in a social club, so you don't have a liquor license, but could you ask somebody to come in who has a liquor license for events? Like we've had that at Northern, that we had somebody come in a place where we could actually bring outside food, and you could bring somebody in who has a license and who has the insurance and everything. Would that be possible for a social club?
If we decide to create the definition of a social club such that it can't have a liquor license, then no, that wouldn't be
Well,
permitted.
the social club wouldn't have the liquor license, but somebody they asked to come in has the liquor license for certain events, like a dancing event, for example.
Into the space, so.
Into the space, yeah.
So the principle, when somebody applies for zoning permission on a particular use, they usually classify themselves with one particular use. So if they're going to be a facility, and I don't know that membership is something, the definition that you talked about, is that like a Webster definition of some kind, or?
Yeah, Merriam-Webster.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what.
And I'm sure we can go through the zoning ordinances and get a lot of different types of definitions, but.
Yeah, I found a lot.
Membership
Yeah.
may or may not be something that we decide to incorporate. I think what the other chapter in the city code was meant to do was to regulate those similar types of businesses to banquet facilities that cater to teens, and then making sure that there was a series of procedures to go through and investigate before you issue the business license for it. So you do the background checks, and you provide, have them provide information on how they do security and maintain their crowd, and tickets or whatever is required. So if we go through this process, we'll make that definition. I don't know that membership would be something that we would necessarily look at. And I forgot the second part of your question. I apologize.
I did too. No, but I'm just worried because it seems to be so similar. The only difference is, as somebody said, the possibility of having a liquor license. Because you could host a party at a social club. You just can't drink, I guess. Or could people bring like little brown bags with their vodka in there?
It would
or
not,
something?
doing little brown bags would be like a bring your own, and
Yeah.
that still requires liquor licensing types of approval,
Okay.
so that would not be allowed. If we decide to define it so that liquor is not part of the definition, then they would not be able to do it there, like you would be able to in a banquet facility, or, if you're an organization like the college, they have rooms available for rent, and then you can go through a process to obtain a specific liquor license for that event, if that's what you're looking to do.
It just, for me, it seems so wishy-washy.
It's
So the difference is really hard. I looked up banquet hall too, and I looked at some like surrounding here. They have that in their UDO or something. They say it's a room or building for the purpose of hosting a party, banquet, wedding, or other reception or social events. So this seems to me very much like a social club too. So you could host a wedding at a social club. You just have to host it with teetotalers, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the banquet facility, when you think about a banquet facility, is usually for a specific type of an event. They rent it out for the night, and it's a wedding or something like that. Or it can be, I think about chamber events. So the chamber has an event, and they secure verandas, and then they still charge, there's a fee to go to the luncheon or whatever. With the social clubs, I see it a little bit more as making sure that, I don't see it as an event. I see it as something that they want to open the doors and have somebody come in and pay a fee, and it's not necessarily a banquet type of event or something that's sponsored by a chamber or a wedding or something like that. It's
More of a gathering place, is it not? It's
right.
not-
It's really more like a bar without a liquor license.
Right,
It's a place for kids to go, and in a college town, I think it makes sense to have that option. One of the things we learned when we met with the college students, when we invited them to come into the downtown and catered them on a tour and asked them to express their opinions, was that there aren't enough options for people to do things in town that don't involve liquor. You know, and you know, for those that are underage, they're not even supposed to be in the bars. So having the possibility is a good thing. I think we just need to make sure it's properly regulated so that you've got responsible people there that are managing the crowd and doing the right thing.
Yeah, I kind of look at this, given the definition that you have in here now, is that a social club seems to be defined more strictly as something where entertainment is the focus, as opposed to a banquet facility, which I would traditionally define as entertainment is not the primary purpose of the gathering. It's really a matter of, like you said, a chamber where, you know, the banquet is the provision of food, a dinner or something is the primary function that's taking place at that point in time, not entertainment, like as it's defined here. You know,
So it's
here
more
it's
like
defined
an
very
event.
specifically
Yeah.
using
Oh, it's a-
entertainment types, you know.
Then can I ask something else? On 4th Street, there is like, and I'm new to this, so I'm so that's why I'm asking probably stupid questions. But the Knights of Columbus, aren't they down on 4th Street?
Mm-hmm.
You can drink there, and it is to me it looks like a social club. Or but what
Oh, I know what one you're, yeah,
what
I know what place
how
you're
would
talking
you
about.
define that? The Knights of Columbus. I mean, these kind of things.
Those are almost like fraternal organizations.
They are, yeah.
Yeah, but that's kind of a social club.
Yeah.
Well,
Like
it
you go there
defines
to
how, it
entertain.
depends how social club is defined in the ordinance.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, that's what the over-encompassing,
Yep.
you know, guideline here
Because you've
is
got
for
the
what we're looking
VFW,
at.
that's the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
But
Mhm.
it's, yeah.
And it has a military purpose,
Yes,
you know,
yeah.
for veterans, so that's my interpretation of it.
But you can rent it out for like graduation parties, and then you can
If
have
they
liquor
have
there.
halls, yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of a banquet hall then. But then, I mean, it's just,
As
it's
an
really.
accessory, so the
Yeah,
principal,
that's
you know, you get
primary
into
function.
principal use and accessory use. So
Yeah.
what is it 360 days of the year? It's a, you know, a fraternal organization or, you know, not-for-profit. And then because of the way they're configured, the other 5 days a year, they're able to rent it out on special occasions, and that's considered an accessory use.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction too, is that these are
Social club,
non-for-profits.
that would be the primary
Yeah,
use,
yeah.
Mhm.
entertainment,
Yes.
et cetera.
I agree.
So that's the key, is coming up with clear distinction
Very clear
between the two.
language, yeah, it has to be really distinguished well.
Yeah.
Nothing that hasn't been said, I guess. I guess I would just recommend whatever language you decide to craft, a 5-point bolded list, whichever distinguishes a banquet hall from a social club or whatever the criteria end up being. Just make sure they're very clear and make sure that, you know, I'm not sure how you would describe it if you have 5 points to make a social club versus 5 points to make a banquet hall, if it has to be all-inclusive of 5 to be one or all-inclusive of the other 5 to be others. But that's going to create the frustration for you as you try and draft these rules to distinguish, since they're so freaking similar. What's going to be the threshold for the rules we lay down in the language of the UDO is going to be the crux by which people are going to try and conform whatever they're making to match it. So just make sure your language and numbers, maybe you can only host so many things in a given year. If you use that as an accessory use to stay within the social club versus a community or versus a banquet hall. So just, I know you've already thought of this, but just I'm sure like specificity and numbers will probably be very helpful for distinguishing and deciding if it's going to be all-inclusive of one versus the other to qualify as being one or the other. Be my only thought.
It looks to me also like one of the big differences is going to be that under 21 are allowed in the social clubs as opposed to a bar or a restaurant venue. That might be another identifier. We used to call them teen centers when I was growing up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that would help differentiate as well. I don't-
Good idea.
So the Knights of Columbus, the Elks Club, those are not social clubs. What are they? Are they classified as that, as
Did you
such?
find a classification in the code? Typically, and just speaking from experience and how different zoning ordinances refer to them, they're either fraternal organization or not-for-profit organizations. They're not typically referred to as social, or I wouldn't think of it as a social club.
Yeah, we have clubs, lodges, meeting halls is a permitted use,
Yeah, it's a
so
lodge, yeah.
Lodge, okay.
that's what those fall
So
under.
that's a different classification.
Yeah.
So now if we, let's say we go with the recommendations from the city, what are the ramifications for the organization that is currently in that, where you were explaining earlier?
The one that's in town currently
Yes.
is pulling out. They've already had some issues for a variety of reasons, and they've made a decision to leave that location.
Okay. So this is to.
This is for moving forward.
Yeah.
Future,
Yeah.
okay.
So you're right, we don't have any in currently, so we just want to make sure that when somebody comes in the next time, that we're better prepared to handle the use.
And are we only talking about Central Business District, or are we talking?
All districts, so.
All districts.
Banquet hall is currently permitted in the general commercial and the special use and light commercial, so. And social club, I think, I think going with the direction, it should be a special use, probably only in the general commercial, unless the members think differently or different districts, but that allows again, lighting, good visibility, parking is a big key, and the general commercial covers your larger commercial areas. Doesn't really belong in the central business district with the parking issues, and light commercial, those tend to be more closer to residential areas. And your light industrial just doesn't have the visibility and the parking and the too hidden potentially in those areas. So we'll probably go forward with that district as a special use.
Making this change would not adversely affect Forandas or anybody else. It's already here as a banquet facility.
Right, if we make it a special use, it'll become legal non-conforming, but they can continue to operate. Yeah.
But if they were to, let's say, leave the location and somebody else was to come in or want to purchase that location, then they would have to take over, they would have to follow the current guidelines and not what was put
Yeah,
onto the
that's what
location at the time,
We're going to talk
right?
about coming up here.
Oh, sorry.
Non-conforming.
Jumping forward.
Anyway.
I'm scrolling
Yeah.
through these too fast.
In a hurry.
Yeah, well,
I think if we,
Okay.
in creating the social club definition and use and in kind of making sure that we have that covered, I don't know that a banquet hall facility would necessarily need to be a special use.
Right.
I don't,
Yeah.
right.
they still need to get the liquor license, and that's a process they need to go through. By nature of their business, they're going to look for a place that has adequate parking, so, we could do it either way. We only have one, and if it became non-conforming, we could deal with the language to address those things, but I think it is an important distinction.
So here's a question, and if this is further in, sorry,
Take
too.
your computer away
Yeah,
from
I'm
you.
going to take, yeah. So if a banquet facility, let's say, applies for a liquor license, and for whatever reason, they're denied that liquor license, but they want to continue as a banquet facility, do we need to think about wording with that? How would we word that situation to make sure that they comply by whatever they're not allowed to have? Just something to think about.
There's some pretty,
Then would they become a social club, though?
And you're-
I mean,
The banquet hall, we could have, they could have a liquor license or not. In
Right.
the definition, they would have to have one or the other, but.
but do we have to make sure that there's some type of wording in there that if they were requesting a liquor license that got denied and want to continue with the facility that they want to
Well, if we have the
open?
definition, they could have a liquor license or not, they wouldn't have to
Okay.
address that, probably.
one of the things we'll probably need to think about, maybe even talk to Dean about, the liquor, all of the liquor issues are distinctly separate from the zoning. And so he may chime in and say, you know, if we want to reference the definition of social club, which talks about the fact that they don't have a liquor license, and reference that section of the code, but to craft zoning regulations that define a use based on whether it does or doesn't have a liquor license can sometimes have competing interests with the liquor
Sure.
code. So usually attorneys like to keep them separate.
And
So-
lead that to the liquor board and, yeah.
Right, right.
Okay.
And would it go to the liquor board before it came to the
Right.
zoning commission? What's the chronology?
I think in the past, usually they've kind of come at the same time through. So
So
they-
it may come to us, and we may not know whether or not
Yeah,
it's been
you wouldn't be
approved
dealing
or
with the liquor
denied.
license or
Okay.
not, but once it gets to the council, they'd have both in front of the
Gotcha,
zoning and
okay.
the liquor license issue.
Okay.
If we have a use coming in and asking us some of those initial questions, we're usually kind of running that up the chain, you know, with the people that are going to be part of that review process
Okay.
and kind of just saying, does this make sense?
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Fine.
No? Okay.
Okay. I'll move on to the next section. Article 14 is permits, which deals with special use permits is one of those. Article 18 is appeals and variances, and I also kind of jump over Article 19, but Article 20 deals with text amendments and map amendments. These are all, you know, the rezoning, the special use permit, the variance, text amendment require public hearings in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So we're looking at a few amendments related to that. One is the public hearing notice process and publication. The UDO right now for all those hearings requires the department or community development director to, you know, do up the notice, send the notice to the newspaper, send the notice, mail it to the surrounding owners within 250 feet. We get that list from the applicant, but we do the mailing out. What we're proposing is to change that to have more reliance on the applicant to do some of this. We would still do up the hearing notice, but we would change the language to provide that the applicant sends a notice to the newspaper. They do the mailing. We'll require that they sign a certified document indicating that they mailed it. We'll still get the list from them, but they'll do the mailing. By doing the publication themselves, they'll be paying for that. Currently, we get a filing fee, but we pay for the hearing notice, we pay for the mailing. So kind of shifting that to the applicant's duties, and there'll be some oversight. We'll have to make sure that they're published it correctly and verify that, but pushes more onto the applicant. That will free up more of our time and have them pay for the hearing notice instead of us, the city. So it'll save some cost. So that would apply to the special use permit, a variance, also a rezoning amendment. So so we have to change the language in that because now it's relying on the city to do all that.
One
So-
thing, I just want to add one thing on that, since this is a workshop format. I've had experience in the past where, you know, you do all of this work for the applicant, and if there's any failure in the notice, you know, somebody doesn't get the right notice or they didn't give you the right thing, when the city is involved in that process, then it becomes a city issue legally that you didn't meet those requirements, and then the applicants, you know, get mad because they're delayed, and it's the city's fault. So a lot of communities use this process and turn that burden back on to the applicant so that they are the ones then responsible for meeting the notice requirements. As Dan said, we would still make sure they provide the right wording in the legal notice and that they're sending it to the right people and helping them calculate that 250 feet. But again, it kind of takes the liability off of the city if something goes wrong in the notice and somebody calls you on it.
So can I ask really quickly?
Sure.
What are the ramifications if they don't publish on time?
Well, then we have to redo the notice. We
Okay.
would do up the notice for them and then provide it to them, given the information with the newspaper, who to contact, who to get it to, the number of days before, and have them advise what day they'll be publishing, and then we'll be getting, because they get and we get, when we do it, a proof back from the newspaper
Right.
showing, here's the legal, here's the cost, give us the okay. So we would still look at that, and then, but they would provide that to us. So
you'd
we'd
ask
make
them
sure
for
they
the proof.
publish it on time.
Okay.
and get the certification that it was done that way. And they just have to sign an affidavit that they did the mailing, but if something came up where they didn't do it in time, we'd have to renotice, so. But I don't anticipate that happening really, because we'll make sure they, have it done in time, and, I mean, it's on, there's no benefit to them to have the hearing delayed, so it's their
Right.
request, so.
Right.
And like Joellen mentioned, it places more of a burden on them. If something goes wrong, something wasn't notified, that they would burden be on them. I mean, we'll have them still get us the list they're using, and we'll take a cursory look at it. If they have a couple properties on there and it looks like there's 40 properties that turn to 50, say, look at it again, but the burden's on them. We had that requirement, so.
Okay.
So that's one part of it. The other is with the notice, the state law allows for a public hearing notice for the special use, the variance, rezoning, that does not need to include a meets and bounds, which is legal description, which is very lengthy. You may have seen those in notice that describe meets and bounds, and nobody can really understand those,
Yeah.
but it's a requirement. But state law allows, I propose that we match that you do not need to provide that if you have a common street address and a PIN number. So on some projects that come in, that's most likely the case, like Kishwaukee Country Club has common address, PIN numbers. So with that in place, we could have just not included the legal description, just the address and PIN number. That gives a good idea where the property's at. Certainly we include maps with the things we send out. So we just propose that to add that to the UDO for those amendments. The language right now says legal description, so we'll want to add that language so we have the option to do that, so to match state law. So that will cut down on the size of the notice, the legal ad, and that will save some costs for the applicant and send it newspaper, because those can be expensive if they're larger, so that will cut down the size of those. So that probably for the rezoning too. Just jumping to Article 20, that's text amendments and map amendments. One thing we want to change too on those is who can initiate those applications. The text amendment, again, is just amending the UDO. The current regulations allow the text amendments to be initiated by the council or the Planning and Zoning Commission, which could be initiated or come at a request from staff to the commissioner council to initiate it. What we're proposing is to add that the staff can initiate a text amendment. Still have to go through the public hearing process and recommendation by the commission and on to the council. So doing that will allow a little bit quicker. If we want to do a text amendment, the staff can initiate one and get the hearing done or have a discussion with the commission instead of waiting for official action by the commission or the council to do that. So that will allow the staff to initiate that. Also with a rezoning, a map amendment. Now, 99% of the rezonings are initiated by the property owner. Occasionally, the city will do those, so this language proposed would allow the city staff to initiate a zoning map amendment, but still go through the hearing process, of course, and final action by the council. And the other changes I just went over. So, any questions on public hearing notices and the changes with that?
I do.
Go ahead.
So I just want to make sure that I understand on the public hearing notice, the benefit to the city of doing this is you're going to be saving manpower, time and manpower. There'll be a cost savings and actual monetary benefit, and then it also shifts the legal responsibility of the process to the applicant as opposed to city.
Right.
Are there any downsides to doing that, to shifting that responsibility and that oversight?
I think with right oversight, the shifting responsibility is making sure the applicant is, I mean, we'll do up the hearing notice, that's kind of the key, the notice itself, to make sure that's right, so we'll still draft that, and then it's making sure they do things right, but I don't, if we're overseeing that enough, there should be no downfall. There'd be less staff time,
Okay.
the cost goes on to the applicant. I mean, we have a filing fee they still have to submit, which is used for when we record documents, that comes from the filing fee per the ordinance that states what
Okay.
that's for. So I don't, if we stay on top, I don't see any downfall unless the applicant, doesn't do something right that we didn't catch or didn't mail, but the burden's on them, and there's no advantage to have it delayed. They want things through quick,
Okay.
as they always do, so.
So do I understand correctly that the city still will provide them with the list of properties within the,
No, they'll provide that. They'll give us a copy. They still have to get that. They get that now.
and so is there going to be a review to assure that they've gotten the correct?
Well, I don't think we're going to look at each
Addresses?
one and do our own measurements, but I think we could take a general look to see if,
Okay.
you know, if they got 3 or 4 properties. We had one month or so back that only had 3 or 4 properties, and there was a lot more. You could just, by looking at the
Yeah,
zoning
and
map.
that was my concern
and
when I
tell them,
read
go back
this.
and do it right.
And that was really my only concern when I read this, was whether or not, I mean, some of these applicants are terrific at what they do.
Yeah.
Some of them are not so terrific.
Some have never done it before, right?
And
Never will
yeah,
again,
and so, you know, what happens is if they miss a property or properties,
Mm-hmm.
then you're gonna have a protest out here that
Yeah.
I never got this, you know, and then, I don't know, then it's everybody's problem at that point, really.
Well, currently, we just get the list from them, and we don't compile the list now.
Oh, okay, all right,
We don't do
that's.
that now.
All right, so then you're not gonna be really doing, that's not a
Yeah,
different
that's up
process.
to still, what
Okay.
the applicant has been and still will be.
Okay,
But we'll,
fine.
So the city could still clean its hands. I mean, even if that person doesn't do it, once we pass on that process
Yeah.
to that person. Let me just paint a thought scenario here, where a given property owner decides he wants to do something in his property that would have implications for zoning of his property, and then he starts this process and he learns that he has to do all these things to get to that point. Let me say that thought scenario is in the middle of the downtown area. Do you have an idea, could you give us an idea of how much it would cost to that person monetarily, money, to send all these letters, all these notifications, and put it in the newspaper and so on and so forth? Do we have an idea how much that is?
yeah, well, I don't know what the ads typically run. We've had,
Any
I don't know,
clue?
80.
Some up, though.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest cost is the ad, it's just regular mail. It's not certified mail. It's just regular mail, so it depends how large, I don't know how many properties, probably the largest, probably 20, 40 properties, maybe if it's a dense, a lot of property owners around it, so.
And with the other recommendation of not including the big legal description, I mean, I want to say ads are usually less than $100.
Yeah,
You know,
It's
unless
like
you get a
40,
really
50,
long
yeah.
one. But if we're cutting that down and taking all of that long legal description out and just putting the address and the PIN number,
It cuts a lot out.
that's going to cut a lot out of the newspaper notice. Then it just becomes printing costs, you know, or paper costs if you're printing them at home,
Correct.
and a letter. It's usually a regular envelope.
And I understand that. Let me backpedal a little bit in my example and just actually put it a little bit more intermediate. All I wanted to do with that example, right now we don't have numbers to play with, but all I wanted to do with that example is that by the city putting that burden on the applicant's side, the burden is not only monetary, but also the methods. You're not familiar with how to do it, so on and so forth, and the chances of that person failing in the process of trying to do it are higher just because he or she doesn't know how to do it very well. I personally don't know how to do it if it were my specific situation. So I understand the desire of the city, for example, to pass the legal burden to the applicant, but at the same time, we're basically in a way putting a hurdle for that applicant to actually achieve his or her goal, which may very well be a very good goal. So the question is, how do we secure that yes, okay, we'll pass the legal burden to the applicant, but at the same time, the city continues to be a tool for the goals of those citizens as opposed to a hurdle?
Yeah, I think we make sure information on the application's updated in terms of where to go to find the surrounding owners, which is through the township or through the county GIS. You can get those. Well, they compile it now and add some documents or to the application, a sheet or something that spells out, where to send the notice to the newspaper, what's the email address. They want a word, specify exactly the things that we do when we send things out. And to the applicant, so that it's clear to them what they're supposed to be doing, and just making sure the following up. The previous community I worked for, we did it this way, and over the years, there was very few problems in terms of applicants getting it right, and they're, when it's motivated, they want to get their thing through. They're even residents that only do it one time in their life, were able to go through it pretty good, so.
Thanks.
I mean, one thing that you get pretty good at is reading, you know, people and where they're at and how much experience they may or may not have. So the big developers, I mean, they do this everywhere they go, so this isn't going to be
Yeah.
a surprise to them. It's really the homeowners, if they're coming in for a side yard variance to put up a garage or something, we spend more time with them anyway, just to kind of help them through all of the process and having those conversations, and they come and they ask questions, and we try to work with them and answer those questions. And that, with additional information on the website, really should be good at helping people do that.
Yeah. A few that don't do very much, we'll have to make sure, hold their hands a little bit more, but that's, you know, just reading them. And the developers do it a lot, so probably most communities are doing that anyway, so.
And if anything, I want to clarify that I'm certainly not concerned with a big developer. I think they absolutely know how to do it.
Right.
In fact, they many times want to do it because they're probably faster and so on and so forth. But it is the common citizen is the one that I'm concerned about in this process.
They'll need a little more oversight, definitely.
Yeah, and I definitely think I like the idea of making sure there's a process sheet or, you know, mapping out the steps that they need to do. I
Yeah.
think that's important, not just on the website, but also some print copies so that, because not everybody is technologically
Good with the
minded.
application and,
Yeah, I like that idea.
Comment and a question.
Mhm.
Comment, I'm very familiar with the process of them doing it themselves when I was in Fort Lauderdale. Anything in Broward County that you want to permit, build, hold an event, et cetera, it's all online. And there's a checklist that goes with it,
Mhm.
and it seems to work pretty well. We managed all right with it. Main purpose for shifting this to the applicant is time or money or liability or
I
all
think
of
it's
the
all
above.
those time, yeah.
I'm just wondering if, in the case of some of the smaller ones, you're not going to spend an equal amount of time overseeing them as it would be to do it. That's my only question. I think, and that's where I think David was going with the same thing. If it's somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, you're already holding their hand through the process, we've got one more step that you have to walk through with them because they don't know how to do it.
Yeah, I think it's just, you know, the oversight will be, I mean, we'll do up the hearing notice, that's the major thing.
Yeah.
The notice itself and the mailing with it. And
Sure.
then just giving them, here, you got to send it to the newspaper, here's the email address at the
Here's your
Chronicle.
checklist of what you have to do.
You got to be in Word
Okay.
fashion and email that to them, and then get the verification back when they get it. And the mailing's pretty easy, all that you do is take the hearing notice and put it in envelopes and get it mailed out,
Okay.
at least 15 days prior, so.
Because really, that's the most technical thing, is that hearing notice. You want
Yeah.
to make sure
Yeah.
that is
Yeah, that's
That's
right.
what I was concerned
Yeah.
about.
Right, we don't want the applicant drafting that, because
Yeah.
that will be
Yeah, that's true.
revised over and
And
over. It's
timing
just-
of it, yeah, the timing was my.
So we'll still do that. That's the most important part in terms of the request and the dates and the waivers, if there's any. So we'll still do that. So it's more delivery and them paying for it instead
you.
of the city.
And if we get 50% of the cases that come through that, you know, get it or can read it and follow it and do it well, and we save that time, that's,
It's worth it.
you know,
Okay.
because this is the gal over here that does all this work.
It's not my fault, I swear.
And she does a great job at it, but we only have her part-time anyway, and there's many more things I could have her doing to help the department become more productive than.
We should make her
sailing us.
full-time.
Folding up things and sticking them in the mail.
There is.
Yeah, we should make her full-time.
I make a
That's
motion.
Glad you're here tonight.
I second.
Yeah.
No, thank you for answering that. It all makes, yeah,
Okay.
I understand it.
Just a couple quick points. I agree with what everybody has said regarding pretty much all of this. This, putting it on the applicant to get the list together of everyone within a 250-foot radius, the notification of what's going to happen. I think there needs to be, I mean, I'm sure but there needs to be a level of rigor on the part of the city to verify. I know it's time-consuming and everything, but the list that they're then coming up with, that they're going to handle all the time building everything and sending out. Because I can see, and I think David had said it, and Deborah had said it, but, you know, that person who gets missed who may have something to say, creating an issue. So some sort of verification process to ensure that doesn't happen, both for applicant and city and commission and everybody in the, who'd be impacted. Just be good to have some sort of level of rigor and whatever that's going to be, however it gets done. Here's my second question, and I hope this doesn't sound too selfish. So we've had a lot of times up here where applicants have submitted requests for variances, and they have not complied with what the UDO requested. Co-location on cell towers mildly comes to mind, for those of you who are part of that. Now, here's my question. If this is put on to applicants, they don't meet with the whatever, the notification of everyone within the 250-foot radius, will that be brought to the commission for discussion on a continuance or an overall denial, which we had the option to do with that? Or will it just be waylaid and not even on agendas? Just curious.
Well, if that becomes our attention that somebody wasn't notified, that would probably come from that individual coming forward to the city.
Okay. Because that's
Indicating
really,
that they
that
weren't
might be about the only way
notified.
you'd know.
And then we know, and then we would either probably continue the hearing or renotice it to make sure they had proper notification, probably renotice it, do a new hearing, so they had proper notification.
So we would meet and the commission would do it, or you guys would do it and the meeting would be canceled?
Well, if it came between the notice and the hearing, and if we scheduled the hearing,
Okay.
we'd stop the hearing, but if it was between that time, before the hearing started, we would notify the
So it's
I
really the
mentioned that
timing.
there wasn't proper notification, and the hearing's closed, and they have to renotice
Okay.
and do it again.
The burden in that case is on the person who's aggrieved by it, so
Okay.
at any point, even up until the point that it's approved and operational, if somebody says that they have been harmed by that and they want to grieve it, you know, the way to fix it at that point would to have another hearing that is properly noticed, similar to the way that we did Campus Cinema pretty recently. So if it happened before, and if everybody wants to be safe, we would suggest that the applicant renotice the hearing, just so they have a clean record and they can't be challenged at a later time.
And just for the record, I apologize if you said it, the city's been handling the mailings right now?
Yeah,
How do you know they're doing it?
we do the mailing.
So you still do the mailing, they just compile it all together and you drop off the mailing? Or
Oh, how do we know that they did?
how do they
mail?
did the mailing?
They
Yeah.
send one to
Oh.
us.
They send the list of the owners within 250 feet.
But did
But how
they,
do you know they did it?
yeah, do they send you a letter or a copy of the letter?
You said there's a certified
there's an
form or something
affidavit
they
signed.
sign?
Yeah.
Oh, when we change it? Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
have an affidavit, and
Yeah.
it's the sign that they
Okay.
sent letters, notices
Okay.
to these individuals. Yeah.
That's it. Thank
And we
you.
have them send us a letter, so then we can check the postmark, and that's the way we can make sure they meet the minimum 15-day notice.
Okay.
And did you say, if I think I heard correctly, they're giving you the list of the properties within 250 feet now?
Yes,
Okay, so they're already compiling.
yeah.
You're doing a cursory, yeah, that looks, or,
Yeah.
oh, wait a minute, there's at least 30 more.
They would do a general check.
Yeah,
We're not
okay.
checking each name, but maybe
Okay.
a count can be done quick. But to go into each, the county's GIS system isn't
Yeah,
set up now where you can do like a buffer quick and get the list
Sure.
punched out. But we do a check. There was, as I mentioned, there was one recently that they were way low initial list, so we told go back and redo it. So
I don't have anything other either.
okay. The final section is non-conforming situations. Is the name of the Article 19. Article 19, there's a couple of subsections in there, several. Talks about non-conforming, and it kind of breaks it down. One section is non-conforming uses of lots, parcels, which is a non-conforming use of land where there's no building on it. There's also non-conforming buildings and structures where the building or structure does not meet one of the bulk requirements like a setback, or extends over the maximum height, or doesn't meet the parking requirements. It's more structural or building related. The one that's discussed here is the non-conforming use of a building. So the use inside the building is not conforming, not the building itself. The current regulations, one of the provisions, there's 4 in there. The last one states when a non-conforming use of a building or structure changes ownership, use or tenancy of the legal non-conforming use must be discontinued. What we want to change here or discuss is the change of ownership. There's really no, the problem is we get some request on this. There's no mechanism in the city right now when somebody changes ownership for us to catch a situation first before the ownership changes. We're not talking about change of the use. We do have provisions in the code for a certification of use and occupancy that's needed, but that's when there's a change of the use itself or a different tenant comes in. But if it's this change of ownership, that doesn't go through the city, so we can't catch that. So what we're proposing is to remove that provision. This is the change of ownership from that provision for non-conforming use of a building only. That will allow us to, so it's not being caught, so it's a little difficult situation to try and, when people contact us, we tell them that, but there's others out there that are changing ownership and then the use is just, continuing. There's other provisions in there. If the use is discontinued for more than 6 months, then it has to be brought into compliance. I think the city changed that a couple of years ago, from 1 year down to 6 months. So that remains in there. So if it's discontinued for over 6 months, then the conforming use has to come in, then another non-conforming use can't go in there. But just change of ownership, we can't track that. So we want to remove that from the provisions.
One of the biggest, or a lot of cases that we get on this deal with residential uses and the number of units in residential uses. So let's say you have a single-family residential zoned property with a non-conforming 2-flat on it. So there's 2 and you're only allowed 1. At the time that property sells, are we going to tell the new people buying a 2-flat that they can no longer have
Right.
2 units in that property? And we've had these situations come up before, and
We had
they're
one
in
presented to
zones
us
that
not
don't
long ago.
support, or, so then they ask, what can we do? Can I rezone it, or can I get a variance? Well, you can't get a use variance. We don't authorize use variance. You could rezone it potentially, but then we'd have this patchwork of, a variety of zoning districts all over town, because we really do have a patchwork of uses. We have single family next to 2 flats and 2 flats with a structure in the back that has a dwelling unit. So it is something that comes up, and while I think it's a good idea potentially, because we don't do a transfer stamp to regulate or look at properties when they're sold, 90% of the time we don't even know when it's happening. So.
And I think that came up, this question, or a similar question, and David might remember this, when we were discussing Chipotle on Sycamore Avenue and the patio outside. And I think there was some question that, depending on how we decided, there was question about what if it changed ownership, and how would what we approved change or go along with the new ownership. And we have had a property owner, I think in the last year, maybe 2 years, that came to us and had a similar situation in an area that is a single family, the residential area. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember that it needed to stay single family.
That's where the vast majority come in residential situations.
Yeah,
A single
yeah.
family, there's 2 units there and they want to
Yes.
buy it.
So let me pick on that example. So what we're saying is that if we go with this recommendation, then the person that gets the new property, or buys this property, that has split into 2 in a single-family residential zone, basically that person buys with the property the non-conforming legal to use 2 apartments, let's say, in that single-family residential area. I mean, am I getting that right? So one drawback of that is that the city loses its leverage in trying to transform an area into the future with time. I hate to blame my own neighborhood, but it's exactly what we wish happened in our neighborhood, that we changed the whole thing to single-family residential, and 35 years from now, God knows if I'm around, we have a single-family residential. But in this recommended situation, everybody will be inheriting the legal non-conforming. And the city would have lost every power to change that neighborhood across time.
Well, we still have power. The legal non-conforming has to follow the restrictions, if it's discontinued 6 months, if they can't expand, the nonconformity. There's other restrictions on that, so we don't lose everything. It's just because we can't track the ownership, we can't.
But it almost feels like the problem is that we cannot track it. I mean, this is public information when things are, when the property changes ownership, isn't it? I don't know.
Well, after the fact, yeah, somebody's bought it, then
I
to go in
understand.
and come in and say,
I bought this
Move
as
the
a
other
two
tenant out.
unit, now you're gonna.
Yeah, and now
Yeah.
you gotta.
we found
yeah.
out that she bought this and,
Chris,
I
Even-
guess that's my biggest concern too, is that the whole idea, the original intent of establishing nonconforming uses is, as the ordinance says, is to identify, to weed out those non-compatible, undesirable uses from areas. And whether your comprehensive plan suggests, as David used as an example, that you're trying to move an area into single-family housing, well, now, that is going to come to a standstill almost, because any attempt to, for existing properties that are non-conforming to be kind of grandfathered in mass, you've kind of lost your sight of your goal. And I guess that's where my concern is that that's kind of, to me, personally, that's going backwards in the whole process of trying to make uses compatible within zoning districts. And I realize that this is, this happens in residential a lot, but couldn't it also happen if there's a business in a residential and you don't like that business? Or
it
that
applies to
business shouldn't
business
be
too.
there?
It's not strictly residential, but that's what most cases come
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
I mean, the fear is that the whole city becomes a legal non-conforming.
Well, yeah,
And that would be a great,
Yeah.
No zoning.
why are we here?
Well, I mean, and it does lose some leverage for the city.
I
We
think
just don't
that,
have the mechanism to
yeah.
catch those, so we're,
So if we really wanted to do it right and
Right,
go
I
after
understand,
this,
I understand.
then the text amendment or the discussion we need to have with the council is implementing a transfer stand.
And some cities do that.
Yes.
And maybe that's worth a discussion. It's not a popular discussion, but if, you have to weigh that
It will
against
not,
what the
yeah.
goal is for,
Um,
But at the same time, I'll go back to what you were saying, that no, you can't, you have a hard time enforcing it. You have a hard time knowing when those transactions are taking place. You said that 90% of them you can't catch. To me, if you can catch 1% of them, that's an accomplishment. You've gone that much further toward your goal, and you've sent a message, so.
I have a question. Both of us, we live around the block from each other, and we have a lot of the older homes that have been split into 2s and 4s over God knows how many years. If you don't allow that to continue, and the owner wants to sell that house, what are they gonna do? They've got 4 apartments or two in a house,
That's the point.
what do you do?
So the first question I would ask is, are they, what zone are they in, and are they
Yeah.
there, are they legal, or are they truly non-conforming? Because,
Yeah.
those issues come into play in a lot of properties.
Yeah.
So keep in mind, anytime property transfers, many of us get calls, and they're usually from a bank or from somebody that's trying to insure the property.
Okay.
And if they're insuring the property, they want to know, is this legal? And if it's non-conforming, will you give me a letter that says I can rebuild if something happens? Or,
That was gonna be my-
yeah.
and we
Okay, here we
can
go. There's the
absolutely
next one.
not provide, and it makes the banks and the insurance
Yeah.
companies crazy
Sure.
that we can't do that. But unless they were to provide us with a multitude of documents, which they're not going to have, and they're not going to spend money to provide, so we get into these really tough situations, and you do have non-conforming situations where buildings, old single family, are split, and they have 2 units, 2 kitchens, 2,
We've got
2
dozens
everything.
around where we live.
Yeah,
Pleasant
totally
and,
separate. So if upon somebody that's lived there for a year or 10, and now they're going to put it on the market, who's going to buy that property,
Right.
knowing they have to invest tens of thousands of
convert it
dollars
back.
to convert it.
to convert
Take
it?
out the kitchens.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was my thought, is what are they gonna do?
And while
If
I
they
get,
have to- yeah.
there would be a goal, if that was a goal, this is certainly a strong way to do that, but I don't think we've been doing it, and we haven't been tracking it, and it makes it really hard. I feel like when people are calling, they're the ones that are trying to be honest, and we really have to put them in a hard, and a lot of people are doing it without calling. And we see different things happening, and we can't track them until it's after the fact. And it's just one of those things that we're not able to.
One of the best allies in this process are real estate agents. And I mean, I happen to know one that is very aware of all this, and I know that he does a good job at this, but the vast majority of them are motivated to do the sale, and if they can do it, they will, pass over this kind of regulations and stuff,
How large of a problem is it with legal nonconforming right now that may be changing ownership, or is it just we're looking toward the future?
I think
It's hard
there's.
to tell how many are out
Yeah.
there right
Okay.
now. I mean, we had quite a few calls. We do have a zoning district, the residential conservation, that covers a lot of areas south of downtown and somewhat north, that the land use that was established, I think, '09 or '08 when it was, is the zoning
Right,
for
right.
that. So those are kind of, can continue, but it's these other areas that are zoned single-family, they have the 2-unit, 3-unit, 4-unit, maybe area you live, that's
Yeah, I mean, because
the
there's a
issue,
lot of
so.
them where we live, and I don't know what it's zoned there. I kind of assumed it was maybe a multi-family because there's so many different types of housing over there.
The other thing to keep in mind that's very difficult for us to track is there is illegal nonconforming,
Yeah.
and that's never transferable, that we oftentimes find ourselves trying to look at units to determine, a buyer will say, there's, 5 units in here. I'm like, really? And you go in and you find things and you can't find permits for it, and then it becomes their burden to prove to you that it's legal.
Right.
And so in those cases, we pull those back and bring them back to what they should be or what we do have permits for. So
There are some that we're able to bring into
Reduce.
compliance the way they're supposed to be.
Right.
And moving forward, are there a lot of requests for legal nonconforming
A lot
in
of
single
requests
housing?
request to,
To bring something in under a legal nonconforming property?
well, they usually don't initiate bringing in, it happens.
It happens.
As a
okay.
result of rezoning.
Are there new ones
Yeah.
happening, I guess is
Yeah.
what I'm asking? Not are the existing ones being sold, but are there new ones happening? I have a house, I want to split it in half and make 2 out of it.
One's doing the work, making it non-conforming without,
Yeah.
those are hard to track,
Right.
how many, unless we find out about
We-
them, so.
Yeah, when we find them, we issue
You do 'em.
violations
Okay.
and follow through.
Okay.
I mean,
Are we granting legal nonconforming? I own a single family, I want to make it into 2 units. So that's another way to,
you can't grant a
Move.
that's
Right.
that's you.
That's-
That's a rezoning or a variance.
right, okay, that's what I was going for.
Right.
So going forward, we're curtailing this
Mhm.
as we move forward. That
Yeah.
was where I was going with it, okay.
And like I said, a couple of years ago, the UDO was amended to reduce it from 1 year to 6 months for, if it's discontinued for 6 months,
Makes sense.
any use in there's got to be in compliance, so.
Okay, thank you.
Had an interesting case we were looking at just last week where we have a structure, a principal structure on a lot. It's a 2-flat, so you have 2 units in the front. You have this garage in the back. It's a 2-story garage. It's pretty new. And the permit came in to do a renovation of the upper level unit in the garage. And there are legitimate upper level units
Yeah.
and garages in
Yeah.
town, so, it's not, it's not unusual to see that kind of a permit, but when you look at it further, or when you take a drive by the property and you say, that garage doesn't look that old, and you go back and you pull the permit, and you find that the permit was just listed for a garage, and when they issued that permit, they had a huge discussion about the height of the garage and the second floor on the garage.
Okay.
And the argument at that point was probably, I just need an area for storage, and then 10 years, fast forward 10 years, now they're trying to retrofit that into a unit. So
Gotcha.
you can see how crafty people can be. in
Oh,
trying
I'm
to-
sure they are. Yeah.
And sometimes we catch those, and sometimes we don't, and then when we don't, 10 years forward after that, the person who's in this job trying to figure out, is that unit legal or illegal non-conforming? So,
I'm
the
glad
joy.
you're in that chair, not me.
It's all a challenge.
Yeah. It was interesting.
Anything else?
Okay. Well, thanks for your feedback. We'll, one other thing, just kind of that we'll do too is this, it's on the last page, just mentioned that we'll go through and make sure we get the right updated departments, Plan Commission and Planning and Zoning Commission, and all that updated sanitary district changed their name recently, so we'll get all the current positions, titles correct in that throughout the UDO, probably clean that up too, so. So with that, looks clear direction, we'll prepare the hearing notice and looking for June 21st public hearing, which will have the specific amendments, we'll bring that in front of a hearing in front of the commission and allow for more input and recommendation.
Okay.
So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for your input,
Yeah.
reports, and items for next meeting.
If there's any other amendments you'd like to, we can,
So our next
Okay.
meeting at the moment
next meeting
is
at the
June
moment.
21st?
No, it'd
No?
be June 7th.
June
There's
7th?
one in between.
Okay.
Okay, I'll be
Do we
here.
have any
But we
notes?
need a little time to put all the language together to meet the 15-day notice, so we're looking at June 21st. For June 7th, no hearings scheduled at this time,
Okay.
as of now. So if there's any, you'll certainly be sent those, but,
Okay.
so that's our next scheduled meeting.
Okay.
Just note the last council meeting, kind of mentioned a few things that the commission recommends as they go into council. The council meeting on May 8th, they did approve the mobile gas station at Hillcrest and First Street that she had previously looked at, so.
Good. Okay. Anything else from anyone? If not, I'll take a motion. So moved by Barbie, second by Buckley. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you.
When are you leaving for Ireland?
Next Wednesday.
Commission.
Oh, God.
All right.
Are you sure there's not room in your suitcase?
All right.
That's why I reworded the